wherever you might be. My name is Sean. I'm delighted you joined us for today's ESPC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Jake Harvey, who will cover one use case, many paths, solving RFP automation across Microsoft Cloud. We love hearing what you guys have to say, so remember joining conversation about today's webinar and more on X. Our handle is at ESPC_community and our hashtag is hashtag ESPC26. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which is updated the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking Content tab at the top. Don't forget to join us for our next webinar, Meet AI in SharePoint, with Zach Rosenfeld from Microsoft, which will take place this evening at 5:30 p.m. CEST. To register for this webinar, go to www.sharepointeurope.com/learning hub. Join us at ESPC this November in Amsterdam. The newly announced program features 120 plus sessions across 9 expert-led tracks covering Microsoft 365, Copilot, AI, Power Platform, security, governance, agents, and more, including practical and live demos and real-world insights from Microsoft experts and MVPs. Super early bird tickets available until May 26th. Use code COPILOTWEEK for additional savings and book using the QR code today. Early bird sale ends Friday the 15th of May. Secure your ticket to EPPC today and expand your knowledge across Power Apps, Copilot Studio, Copilot, AI, Power Automate, security, and dynamics. Use code COPILOTWEEK for extra savings and scan the QR to book now. As always, if you have any questions at any stage, feel free to type in the chat box and Jake will get to them during the webinar. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it's available. And now I'm going to pass over to today's webinar presenter. Hello, Jake. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Sean. Hi, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join today. I'll just share my screen and we can get started. If you can just confirm, Sean, please, that you can see that.
Yeah, I'll let you know when it comes up. Maybe click share.
Yeah, 1 moment. Let me just try.
There you go.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, welcome everybody. And again, thank you for taking the time. I'm Jake Harvey, Automation Lead at Advania UK. We're a large Microsoft partner in the UK, part of the Advania group, which spans across Scandinavia, South Africa, and the US. Be our head of automation within a UK company. The webinar today is really going to focus on automation in the RFP space. There's a huge opportunity across use cases like this, and since the emergence of generative AI especially, we really started to see pockets of the RFP use case that we can really utilize tools like Copilot and the Copilot product family to really increase productivity and accuracy across this process. So I'm going to take you through the opportunity as a whole, what we're seeing in the market. There's lots of products out there that kind of claim to do everything that you could possibly want to do around RFP automation. But there's angles to this use case that actually make sense to maybe take a Microsoft Cloud approach to build rather than purchase off the shelf. I'll take you through some of the approaches that we've taken within Advania UK. We've come across this use case many times now and tackled it in lots of different ways with different customers of ours. And then just to conclude really on some findings and thoughts that if you tackling this use case or one similar to this, that you can take those learnings into your thinking. So overall, the challenge itself. So RFPs are something that lots of organisations deal with, whether that's creating RFPs and issuing them out to customers, or whether that is responding to RFPs and it being an important part of how you win business. And typically, RFPs will follow this step on the left-hand side, especially if you're responding to RFPs that are issued out to market. The RFPs will be received by an organisation. So ourselves, Advania UK, a consultancy business, respond to many RFPs, and we'll receive the RFP documentation from the issuing customer, and we'll digest what that RFP is about. What's the business problem? What's the customer looking to get out of the response and the work that they're procuring? We'll then lean on our subject matter expert knowledge within Advania and existing knowledge that is pulled into our document management system, our knowledge management system, and pull that broad set of people and data that we have to put our best foot forward in responding to that RFP. We'll then delegate tasks and give people different roles and responsibilities in how we respond to this specific RFP itself. And then the response will be written, many different formats dependent on the request as a part of the RFP. But typically these will be in Word formats or in PowerPoint formats that are then presented potentially back to the customer, and then the response is ultimately submitted. For anyone who's been through many of these processes in the past, there's a lot of typical challenges that repeat themselves in almost every RFP response process that you go through. So when you first receive that RFP, it's extremely time consuming to read. Not every RFP is extremely kind of sequential in its requirements. It can often be bodies of paragraphs where you really have to digest a lot of information to understand the customer's challenge. It's often in organizations as well, there's concurrent RFPs going on at the same time. So to digest these lots of information and accurately understand exactly what the customer's asking for, it's easy to miss information or kind of misinterpret information through each RFP that you begin. When then we're leaning on SME knowledge within an organization, generally knowledge management is a challenge in every organization, whether that's how content is stored, how data is stored, how information is captured in a way that makes it easy to access when responding to processes like RFPs. SME knowledge retention through kind of people leaving the business, moving roles within an organization can't always be the easiest thing to capture. So whilst you may have responded very well to a similar RFP in the past, the person who was kind of core to that response is no longer in your business, and it was a challenge to actually get that data in one place. And sometimes actually SME availability is difficult, especially if it's a niche topic, to actually get the time for people to really dedicate the time that they need to give an accurate response is difficult. Around task delegation, again, giving people the right kind of time and focus and commitment can be a challenge, especially when there's tight deadlines. It never seems like any RFP response is miles ahead in the future that gives you lots of time to pull the right team together and respond. It always seems to be a tight deadline. So this is obviously a constant challenge. And then when responding to the RFP requirements themselves, I think often we can feel that we've very accurately answered a question, but it's difficult to fully analyze an answer against a question in its entirety, especially if you're reviewing that answer not as the SME itself. So actually there's often opportunities there for automation to support. Another challenge we often see, and I know we feel, is being sure that we're responding maybe with our best answer and examples. You may have many relevant answers and examples, but are you putting your best foot forward? Especially if you might have completed many similar projects in the past, you want to put your response forward that's going to give you the best opportunity to win, not just any relevant example. And we want to be consistent in how we're responding as well. It always being important. And at that point, then a response being submitted, it's often really time consuming to do a full end-to-end holistic review that kind of fully analyzes the RFP against your response and helps you identify gaps. It's a extremely manual activity, and that's why we have, I guess, human teams of people within organizations doing this, but some obvious opportunities for automation there. As with any kind of use case that is repeatable, there's products all over the market. We're past that stage now where sort of 5-10 years ago, there was this mindset of there's an app for everything. There's now, hundreds of apps for the same thing and services for the same thing as well, whether that's startups creating products dedicated to these single use cases, whether that's large vendors who, multi-product in spaces of, for example, like this of winning work. There's going to be huge collections of different products on the market that you need to kind of weigh up. Is it worth buying an off-the-shelf product, or is it worth going down the route of configuring or training people to use technology or building solutions yourselves? And I think this is something that we're very much still figuring out, but hopefully through this webinar I can take you through some examples of the routes that we've taken. So 3 insights really that kind of definitely currently trending in this space. So success around utilizing AI is really, rarely going to come from a single tool. There's not going to be a single off-the-shelf product that will solve all of your AI use cases. And I think often a mistake, if we bring this back to RFP, will be that organizations will lean on a generic AI tool that they have to hope that it would solve large portions of an RFP process where, unless it's quite a tailored solution, it's not going to be focused enough to do the best possible job. But I'll take you through some examples of maybe where some of the kind of out of the box products can fill some of the gaps, but definitely seeing that more kind of ecosystem type approach being one that seems that is going to be the way forward. SaaS as a whole is experiencing some rejection. Organizations obviously getting very excited about agents and the ability to tailor solutions to their business, but part of this really just comes down to the speed of value and then the flexibility that the solutions that organizations can get through agents that they're building themselves and tailored solutions through low code versus buying off the shelf and struggling to tailor that product to their organization's specific needs and feeling that they're having to almost bend their processes to that solution. That's not something that we want businesses to do. And finally, kind of, actually having access to the right expertise to not only understand the business problem, but understand then how to wrap technology around that business problem is, seeming to be an extremely important asset for organizations to have. So whilst investing in specific products or licensing is important, making sure that we're accompanying the kind of process owners, technology owners with some real experience, industry experience of how we've innovated in this space before, and shaping automation and AI technologies around use cases like RFP is definitely proven to be an extremely powerful thing in this ever-changing technology landscape. So thinking of RFP, I mentioned, there's so many products out there, and maybe what we're seeing is organizations are going to, or have been going to buy an off-the-shelf products. We worked with a big legal firm over a year ago now. I've been working with them on lots of their kind of automation and AI transformation, but RFP and the kind of theme of winning work being a big focus for them as a legal business. And what they did, they went out and bought the market leader for RFP with Gen AI capabilities built in. It gave you the ability to have a real content library of your exemplar assets and file storage and workflow to delegate tasks through the RFP process. And it worked for a while. But what the organization quickly came to realize was actually, a platform like M365 where the business actually works day to day, where the business collaborates, where the business shares content outside of an RFP process, tends to be where people want to work and where they need these capabilities to present themselves, rather than feeling like they're constantly portal hopping when changing process into different tooling. So we've worked with organizations that kind of started in that off-the-shelf space, got very excited about what it might achieve. But actually, as they begin to adopt, especially AI capabilities across more use cases, they realize actually bringing the capabilities and the technologies closer to where people are actually working and their day-to-day content is going to be the way forward and the way to win. So myself operating very much in the Microsoft space, kind of can really see where we're trying to bring some of these processes into M365. It serves as a really amazing platform for having so many capabilities where they already wrap around and integrate with your key content. We can really start to shape some of those amazing capabilities to innovate in your core business processes. So really breaking a use case down like RFP, and I mean, this is how within Advania we kind of position automation as a whole, that it kind of sits in these three categories. That every organization has these three challenges to solve when they're thinking about automation, and this doesn't change when you look inside the RFP use case itself. People want to work faster and be more productive, and in that personal automation space, how can we assist employees in completing their tasks more efficiently and effectively? How can we give people specific tools that day to day, if they have a manual challenge, they can think of ways to utilize technology to work faster? And there's many cases of this in the RFP process, and I'll take you through a couple of examples of these shortly. But you can think of being asked to answer a specific question, but it's very manual to go and search through all content across your repositories. It could be that you've been asked to go and kind of research a specific area of an RFP, but it's a task that's kind of being delegated to you. It's not really part of the RFP process. It's unique to maybe that specific RFP. Having technology that you could utilize on a personal level to be more productive can be extremely powerful. From a defined automation perspective, so how can we start to instruct technology to do some of the manual work for us? This doesn't have to be intelligent in nature. This could be just wrapping some simple workflow around certain parts of the process. So in our organization, we have specific statuses of RFPs that we're working on, and we continuously think of ways of how we can set some defined automations to do things like task allocation, or even task kind of delegation if people are off sick, for example, or on annual leave, when a common person who would pick up a certain bit of an RFP process. How can we make sure that just doesn't get lost in someone's inbox or lost in the team's message, that there's automation wrapped around that so it goes to another member of the team? Lots of thinking that we can do around that. And then fully intelligent automation being, how can we hand parts or entire segments of an RFP process to technology for it to just go and complete that specific part for us autonomously, and get to the specific output that we're looking for. So I think a good example of this would be any kind of deep research element to an RFP process where we want to take some of that manual work that teams of people might do together. Really, we could accelerate this process by shifting that off to kind of a deep reasoning model to go and find out some of that initial research for us. And when we're thinking about kind of introducing these automation experiences, I think it's important to, I think RFP is such a great example of this, of not getting kind of lost in tackling the entire RFP process itself, and thinking about how RFP and the kind of activities that form part of an RFP process kind of fit within your automation strategy as a whole. What are the capabilities that sit around your organization that you could put in place to improve either small or large parts of that RFP process to really enhance that experience for users? And not everything, when we talk about AI, needs to be agents, or not everything needs to be intelligent at all, really. There's some really quick wins and valuable wins by just looking at kind of simple workflow automation or better information capture through the kind of solutions that we can deliver around an RFP use case. That if we think of this as a bit more of a jigsaw puzzle or kind of Lego blocks falling on top of each other, that kind of with each block we put in place, we get more mature in how we're tackling RFP as a process within an organization. I think for lots of organizations, going for the big bang approach will just be too difficult, too time consuming, probably too expensive. Technology may have passed you by the time you actually get there. Maybe picking up smaller chunks of the process and thinking about it more in this model of, well, what is our broader automation strategy for RFP? What are the capabilities that would be useful and valuable across a process like this? And what some different types of solutions could we put in place across this process that could be really valuable, could really be a better way to innovate? And some of the things that we may think about across those end user experiences. So just what we see as being kind of the core automation capabilities. So we think of end user applications for people to have a better experience of interacting with data, submitting data, managing data around a process, making sure that we have good data processing capabilities in place. So from kind of ingestion of RFP information or integration into different business data, how is that data actually being processed around the RFP use case itself? Other capabilities such as RPA and integration, we see these as just kind of core automation capabilities that form any part of a mature automation strategy. But if you take integration as a whole, what an amazing capability to have mature in an RFP process when you think of the many different spaces that key information and data may be spread that is useful for responding to RFPs. Having a good integration strategy can be really powerful with this type of use case. And then agentic AI. So especially if we're moving to kind of scenarios where we're trying to make parts of the process autonomous, there's definitely some huge opportunities here, and kind of the governance then will wrap around not only the technology and the process, but in kind of the people that form part of this as well. And why this kind of slide's useful, and we use it a lot with different types of use cases of, if we take something like personal automation, and let's take the example of trying to answer a question quicker as part of an RFP response. Well, you definitely need an end user application to do that. So to integrate with a thing, a capability that enables you to submit a question and get an answer quicker. Well, an end user application like M365 Copilot would be a fantastic kind of front end to give someone to do that. Integrations then into the right data would be extremely useful, making sure that it integrates into the right parts of SharePoint, or potentially even third-party systems outside of your Microsoft ecosystem that you bring into Copilot's knowledge base to do that. So even just between, just for that kind of personal automation use case, we start to create this Venn diagram between personal automation, end user app, and integration, where we start to see the capabilities that we would need to light up to bring that experience to life. So as we kind of go through the next few slides, we'll cross over these different end user experiences of personal automation, defined automation, intelligent automation. You'll kind of see how these come to life. So typically, before we go into a couple of examples of, I guess, using the Microsoft products to support the RFP scenario, most organizations will go through this journey of maturity, and especially with our customers, we've seen this being similar in the RFP space as well, where organizations maybe license their user base with Copilot, and they start to use it for the kind of personal productivity scenarios, doing research, doing analysis of the content required to respond to an RFP. But it gets to the point eventually where they need more focused capabilities. They need more control than the black box that is M365 Copilot. So to start to automate some of the high value processes that form part of the RFP journey, they start to plug in some very specific agents that may support along that way. But for, I guess, maybe the more ambitious organizations, or organizations where there's really kind of complex scenarios as part of their RFP response. And I think, a legal example, like on the right hand side here, of like legal workflows that form part of their response, certain tailoring of Microsoft Foundry, we've seen work great in the past. And at the end, I'll take you through an example of where we built a kind of fully custom through Azure and Microsoft Foundry RFP response tool that kind of does everything from ingestion of the original RFP to supporting your response. But there's value in each of these pockets, and that's what I'll take you through now. So what the demos are going to do that I'm going to take you through is there's going to be kind of 4 examples of the different ways that at Advania we've tackled the RFP scenario, spanning it from M365 Copilot, SharePoint agents, Copilot Studio solutions, and then real kind of packaged solution within Azure. So when we're looking around the M365 Copilot scenario, I think the types of outcomes that we've been working with organizations to achieve is really just to increase productivity in the kind of manual content-based work that happens around RFPs. So a focus would be, for example, intelligently retrieving company knowledge to support RFP responses. In SharePoint agents, how can we be more focused in the content that we're working with, and really limit AI search across our content for where it may feel too broad in Copilot, you may have some exemplar areas that SharePoint agents can focus on. And then with Copilot Studio, how can we start to actually underpin some of the RFP process within the agents that we build, or really create some expert agents or SME agents, as we call them, that maybe fulfill the roles that humans previously did in the RFP process. And then finally, kind of the blank canvas that Azure gives us, how can we really intelligently support that entire end-to-end use case of an RFP? And it's definitely not kind of one option will be great for all organizations. We'll see some organizations go down the fully custom route, and it is a single custom built tool that works for them. We'll see other organizations that use a combination of all these technologies to very accurately respond to RFPs and feel like they're doing a good job in this space. I know in Advania we have more of a makeup like this on the screen, where our bids team very much work in a custom built tool that does a lot of the great work for them and helps underpin their work with automation. But then SMEs around the business will lean on other tools like Copilot and focus SharePoint agents to lean back on their content repositories that are often difficult to navigate. So starting with M365 Copilot. So hopefully, kind of as we've been talking through, and for any of you who've used M365 Copilot to support in these types of knowledge-based processes, I think some of the opportunities here will be quite obvious. But here are just some examples that, just to call out where we'd see Copilot typically be really useful. So responding to RFP questions. So you're reading through an RFP document, often with a whole host of questions that you need to respond to. How can we lean on Copilot to go and track down the right knowledge? And I'll show you that as a demonstration in a moment. Validating the responses to the kind of criteria that have been set out in the RFP. So not only helping you, for example, respond to the question, but actually then when you actually formulated your answer, comparing that back to the question itself and back to the content within the RFP to make sure that you've met everything that it asked for. It could be for things like sourcing similar responses to similar questions in the past that you've got from previous submissions, or if you've got answer bases that you lean on to be useful, this could be a great way to use Copilot. Or for things like just making sure that the structure of your answer meets the requirement of the RFP itself. So making sure that you've got good structure that meets the requirements, but also maybe hitting things like word counts or character counts that are often, kind of a manual step at the end that Copilot can really quickly support with. So focusing firstly then on bringing Copilot to life for and helping you answer questions. So this is just the kind of standard M365 Copilot interface in work mode, just on the auto kind of model selection. And the question I put forward is just saying that I'm answering an RFP question. So Copilot's immediately grounded, knowing that I'm answering an RFP. The customer wants to know our capabilities around delivering Power Platform governance engagements. I wanted to detail things around environment strategies, which customers would typically ask for, and just to provide redacted examples because we want these to be anonymized when they go back for the RFP.
Jake, there's just a question in there, just wondering what is the full meaning of RFP?
Sorry, say that again. It broke up a little bit for me, please.
So someone's just wondering what's the full meaning of RFP?
Of RFP, so request for proposal. So be a tender process. So typically as part of a tender process, an organisation will issue out a request for information initially, which would be go into market asking for suppliers to respond with how they kind of approach a business problem, and then based on the kind of feedback for that, they'll go back out to market for the information that I guess they saw fit for their use case, and do a request for proposal for people to respond to actually win that work.
Perfect. Thanks, Millet.
Yep. Perfect. So you can see in this Copilot example here now, so it's going to cross our SharePoint knowledge base, and he's pulled out some examples of where we've delivered good Power Platform strategy in the past. So it's pulled out what that client's challenge was, what our approach as Advania was to solving that challenge. So making sure that in an environment strategy, for example, that there's DLP policies set in place, that we've used things like the COE starter kit to monitor environments. And he's pulled out a few different examples here that really help then inform our answer. In the past, to go and do this, you'd be scanning through PowerPoint documents, previous project documentation. You'd be going to speak to colleagues about maybe projects that they'd worked on in the past. And it's still okay to go and do all those things, but it's a real accelerator here to be able to use something like Copilot to enable you to kind of very quickly source that information. And use Copilot then to get kind of to that first version of an RFP answer, where maybe you just want it to be kind of set to a specific word count, in this case 300 to 400 words, and it gives me that very good first version of how Advania would approach an environment strategy and Power Platform governance focused engagement with our clients. And Copilot always does these great bits of kind of suggesting additional ways that it can help you. So, if it was an RFP from a customer from a very specific sector, or if it didn't quite meet your word count, or if you wanted to explicitly call out certain aspects of the question, we can do that nice and easy in here. So, first of all, just a really quick example of how Copilot can definitely support you in answering questions in an RFP. And I know we use this a lot within Advania itself. But it's a very low barrier to entry. Anyone in the business can use this with just some light Copilot training. And I guess, as always, just good prompt engineering will enable Copilot to do a much better job. Next, moving on to SharePoint agents. So really kind of focusing retrieval. And I think working with organizations where we'll tend to see this really be a powerful bit of capability to lean on will be, organizations don't always have all of their content in perfect kind of structure, in perfect quality. So Copilot on its own maybe does bring back incorrect information or outdated information. We're actually creating a SharePoint knowledge agent that's focused on specific bits of content, can really support you in making sure that you're just targeting AI content that will give you a good response. So some examples of where you may use this would be if you do have an exemplar content library that you use for RFPs. So, for example, in terms of case studies of where you've done work similar to this before, you may have a case studies library that you point a SharePoint knowledge agent at. So if you ever wanted to query those case studies for a specific bit of work that you've done in the past, you don't need to go and navigate through each document. You can point the agent at those case studies and very quickly get a response. It might be that if you've got a bids team, internally we've got a bids team, lots of organizations have dedicated pre-sales or RFP response teams, where you actually want to enable those teams to go and navigate the SME knowledge bases that exist around the organization, rather than always having to wait for a response from the SMEs themselves. So it's really useful to have these knowledge agents set up in the different content repositories so people can navigate to them and ask questions against that data. It may be that all of your previous responses are centrally managed. In lots of organizations, this isn't the case, but in some where good knowledge management is in place, this would be an extremely powerful asset, so you can always query back onto good responses that you created in the past to get guidance on how you should answer a future question. And then kind of finally, where many departments are kind of responding back and all knowledge is across many different repositories, you could set up a more focused SharePoint agent here to kind of just focus on those repositories and make sure that that's the content that's being queried, rather than the broad net that Copilot will cast. So to take you through a quick example now here of a SharePoint knowledge agent. So this is within our intranet, our Fresh intranet. Advania have a product called Fresh, which is our custom intranet for SharePoint. And as part of this example, we're going through a process of using our social value knowledge to answer social value questions that are typically asked in a lot, especially public sector RFPs. And they'll be on topics like how we're promoting diversity in the organization, or workforce equality. What are our processes in place to make sure that we're meeting these social value? Because as part of the response, often organizations want you to demonstrate how you're meeting your social value commitments in order for them to engage with you. So this is a focused agent that is fixed solely to the social value section of this bid management site. And the question that I'm asking it here is, what are our social value commitments across entry-level employment? So as Advania, what are we committing to make sure is in place to support entry-level employment into our business? So, this is obviously a really important thing, making sure that people coming into their career, whether that's out of university, whether that's straight out of school, there is a way into our business, because there's amazing talent out there that we can bring in, and we need processes to do that. So you can see there it's searching just the bid management site, and it starts to pull out from our social value data that we have in here. Yet we've got an apprenticeship scheme in place. We've then got a technology associates trainee program, which is essentially kind of a graduate scheme. And it will give you then links to the specific parts of the data that you can click off to read more in depth if you want to. But what's interesting now, and this is where I guess the more focused SharePoint knowledge agents become really powerful, is if I then ask it a question of, well, what is the Advania annual leave policy? Well, this has nothing to do really with kind of our social value commitments as an organization. This is much more of a HR policy area. So, you wouldn't expect to get a good answer on what Advania's annual leave policy is in this space. So yeah, let's see what the agent does here, because we've seen lots of stories in the past of kind of AI hallucinating or attempting to answer different questions when maybe it doesn't have the data. So you can see that it's responding saying it searched for anything to do with annual leave and the holiday policy, but it didn't find a document that specifically references our policy. It then suggests, though, what it can confirm from the search, so that in social values, there's no mention of the annual leave policy at all. And as it scrolls down in a moment, what's interesting is it attempts to tell you where the policy is most likely to live. So it will try and navigate you to the areas then of our intranet, of where probably you're going to find that type of content. But it's a good example of where a really focused agent will just concentrate on the bits that it should be good at, and in the areas that it shouldn't have the data to access, and definitely doesn't as part of the scope as this SharePoint knowledge agent. A really powerful way to make sure that an agent's focusing on the content. I think this is a great way and should be enabled for any organizations that have M365 Copilot in place. I think having these SharePoint knowledge agents, especially in your site collections where you've got good data, can only be a good thing, really. It really helps people search content. It's a much better experience than SharePoint search itself. Next on to Copilot Studio. So here's where we're really trying to think about kind of tailoring kind of an agent experience to your organization and process itself, and being a bit more of a kind of a transparent solution rather than the black box that is Copilot and is a SharePoint knowledge agent, really. So here's some examples of where you may build Copilot Studio solutions and agents for the RFP scenario. So potentially you've got a really well-defined RFP process that you can kind of underpin an agent with, and it's that agent's job then to guide anyone involved through the RFP steps. I think this would probably work for some really kind of simple tenders that come out, but maybe for some more complex ones, I think you'd end up building quite a kind of beast of an agent solution that you may want to break down into sub-agents. And I think this point to where you've got more focused agents that exist for when people need them, of checking answer quality, or supporting with certain types of questions, maybe going back to that social value example. It could be examples, and one I'm going to show you in a moment, of where you create a really focused kind of technical architect agent. In our case, most of our proposals are very technical, that we going back usually responding to how we deliver certain solutions. So could we create something like a technical architect agent to enable us to very quickly pull together that first response of how we might tackle that technical challenge? And then the final one being, agents can really help us solve an integration gap. It's we've tried to do this for years with UI and with applications, and I think agents are our next attempt at this. So how can we use integration to stop portal hopping between many different systems where our data lives? So I think that's potentially a good route as well, through conversational AI, kind of eliminating the clunkiness of integration gaps and portal hopping. How can we bring that into one conversational interface? Okay, so just load. So what we've got here is this is actually built more kind of as a citizen development solution initially as part of our digital workplace team. But it has now grown into being a solution that we're using for lots of different kind of technical proposals and technical responses. And really what's happening is an agent's tasked with kind of deriving from the prompt that is given. Let's go back a step here. Understanding what the business challenge is. So the purpose of this agent is that you feed it a use case and it will give you the technical approach to that use case. It will base that approach on Microsoft licensing knowledge that you already potentially have of that organization and their licensing and their technology setup, but also on the types of work that we've done as Advania ourselves in the past. So we'll lean on some important knowledge base here to get to this first stage of proposal. So the agent's got many different bits of instructions here that it will always follow, and any prompt that's put in, it will get passed through. And ultimately, what we want the agent to do is reference those two files there, which is the Microsoft licensing guide, and then we want it to essentially create the first draft of a proposal. So we've got an example use case here. So an organization essentially wants to replace CrowdStrike for 100,000 users across their devices, and they've got concerns around ransomware and really want to make sure that they get the right technology choice in. So you prompt the agent here, and essentially what it's doing now, it's leaning on Microsoft's licensing guide, it's leaning on Advania's knowledge for how we've previously delivered this type of work, and it's leaning on any knowledge it has of this organization if we've worked with them in the past. And what you'll see here now is the agent has done some analysis, and for this specific technology proposal has now spat that data out into a SharePoint list. It's summarized the requirement under requirement summary here of the use case that the user prompted with, and then it's given a proposal of an approach. So it says, the solution intends to retire CrowdStrike and standardize on a Microsoft endpoint protection stack. RFPs must include ransomware protection, automated investigation, remediation, etc. So it's coming up with the approach of what the technology needs to do. It's suggesting what the primary technology would be in order to meet that use case, which it's suggesting is Microsoft Defender, and then it's giving any licensing considerations that as part of a proposal we would need to list to make sure that they're considered. What it then does is then spit out this first version of the technology proposal. So this is straight from the agent through a single prompt, leaning on the right data, and then getting straight to this first version of the proposal itself. So it's giving the recommendation overview. It's then mapping capabilities to the RFP itself. So the specific requirements within the use case, and listing some other things that you typically put into response around scalability, performance. It's not the final product here, but what it's really doing is kind of shifting the responsibility of the person writing this response from being the kind of document author to the document refiner, and having all the data that they need in the first place to get to a good outcome. Right, just conscious of time, and just one more demo to go through. So kind of moving finally on now to kind of the kind of best in class version. If you think of a ground up solution built in kind of Microsoft Foundry and Azure, where maybe 80% of your requirements being met by a solution just isn't enough. And some organizations, this is the case. If they're going to invest, they want 100% of their requirements being met that Microsoft out of the box products just typically aren't going to do. They're there to meet the requirements for the masses, not for one individual organization. And for organizations where these types of work winning processes, RFPs, tenders, bids, are fundamental to pipeline. Some organizations, I guess, win work more through relationships. Other organizations very much rely on these processes to win work. So it will be worth maybe investing in more kind of a gold standard solution. And the final one I'll just call out there, for some organizations, kind of data and AI residency considerations as well may be an important one, but data being closer to home is important for them, and actually storing it in kind of Microsoft cloud-based tools or other AI vendors may not just kind of suit their strategy. So this example here is a completely redacted RFP, but it's a list of questions. It's going to be a little bit blurry on the screen, but as you'd expect in RFP documents, probably struggling to read that, but this says that, have you contracted services for similar to work in the past? Whole list of questions as part of an RFP process you typically get asked to respond to. And you'd manually go through these, usually find the right answer. So we've got a tool that we've created within Advania where we take these RFP documents, upload it to the tool. So this is a request for a digital workplace platform. So something like an intranet. And firstly, we're guiding the tool to say, first of all, can you extract questions as individual items? We want to make sure that we understand distinct questions that are being asked. And we want to make sure that all questions that we respond to, we always reference that this is based on our experiences at Advania UK, to make sure that it's clear that this is our own experience. We're then guiding the tool to look at very specific previous responses that are relevant to this RFP. So in this example, we're pointing at some redacted kind of digital employee workplace experience examples to match the topic of the RFP, and it pulls down on the left-hand side the previous responses that it's gonna reference. So it's in progress now, just going to analyze that specific RFP. And then if we go into our bids management section, we've got all of our knowledge base across our different SME areas within our organization of our security teams, our digital workplace teams, etc., where these are our kind of exemplar responses that we want the agent to lean on. So it's just, what's happening is the tool is now reading through these, and based on the requirements of that RFP, going to understand from those responses what's relevant and what previous work we've done that would be good to bring into this. So after that analysis, we come back into the tool, and in a moment you will see that what the tool has done. On the right hand side, it gives you the original RFP document, and on the left it's pulled out every single question that is being asked as part of this RFP process. So the supplier name, obviously in this case Advania UK, and some typical questions like business address, etc., etc. But then the more kind of complex questions that get pulled out, so details of our insurance policies, whether different countries that we can operate in. And the tool has gone into our content within SharePoint and made sure it's pulling out the right answers to give us that head start and not having to go and kind of chase down all this information around the organization. We can link back to where specific questions that are pulled out are mentioned within the document itself. And then we can go and kind of review the kind of final answers that get generated. And essentially what this ends up spitting out is this first version in a moment of Advania's RFP response, where everything from a kind of our exemplar content based on the RFP document that was requested is pulled out in here and starts to give us kind of that first version of an entire RFP response. So not just the technical solution that the technical agent did, but any of the compliance information we need to potentially supply as a supplier, any other examples of relevant information that we think would be useful to include, we can pull into here. And again, really moving that responsibility from being just a document author more to a document refiner and kind of speeding up that knowledge collation process. So just to round up, and again, conscious of time, and we're going to leave some time for any final questions that have been asked. It is a complex solution to work on. I mean, in much more than just retrieval. I think some of the co-founders that kind of working on this use case with many customers now that we've come across is, the details of RFPs are obviously quite mixed in how they're presented, and information and questions are obviously often mixed together. It's not that often that questions are just called out specifically for AI to understand that these are the questions that need to be answered. It can be that questions are inferred as part of descriptions within the RFP that we need AI to understand. Questions can also be in multiple parts and kind of, be through kind of 1A, 1B, 1C type structuring. And you really need AI to understand that there's kind of links through those questions and not to treat them solely as distinct questions it responds to. Document challenges that you'd expect, being kind of formatting and line breaks, actually can often be really important to the context of the question. And if AI doesn't understand that, it can really kind of mislead its answer. And sometimes obviously content just can't be found. So how do you tailor the user experience then to make sure that as an end user, when content that you're looking for isn't found for an answer, how are you guided to know that maybe this is something you need to take offline, and you don't just kind of start continuing to prompt and end up getting to content that's just not fit for the question. Some unexpected needs that we came across. So there's lots of scenarios where real critical language needs to be added into an answer for it to be kind of the perfect answer that you intended. So, especially as I said previously, we've done a lot of work with legal customers in this space, and for them that real kind of critical language is so important that AI is not actually amazing at doing. So there's a lot of tailoring there to get that perfect. In different scenarios, and I know we do this as Advania as well, we'll describe ourselves as a different type of business to kind of fit the business challenge that we're going for, whether if it's a managed services problem versus a consulting problem. The way that we present ourselves as a business, whilst we do both things for our customers, may be slightly different. And the scenarios where a question maybe wasn't specifically asked in an RFP, but it's useful for you to almost answer and expand on a question with additional information because it really supports your answer that you're giving. AI obviously won't do this, and it needs the guidance from an initial question itself. So your ability to almost create fake questions for AI to follow that really support your answers has been a kind of a funny one to try and tackle. So just to wrap up here, so some key takeaways. Microsoft and Copilot products, there's so much opportunity across these products for supporting the RFP use case. I think it's this real combination though of using kind of build and train versus tailoring the product or building solutions, and really having a balance of that through your organization. Otherwise, kind of going down this route of a single off-the-shelf product might be difficult to tailor to everyone's needs. And not every solution needs to be built. It's so easy to build things through no and low code now, but training and general adoption work around things like Copilot can really add so much value. So offering those different options from adoption through to kind of adoption of out-of-the-box tooling through to tailoring of solutions and build solutions is a really important thing, I think, for an IT or an innovation department to offer. And then finally, the options will continuously evolve, and I think our view of how these continuously evolve will have to be, we'll have to embrace that, because I think going on these long 6-month solution builds around these types of use case now does not really suit the market, and by the time you get there, technology's moved on and your solution's already outdated. So yeah, I think definitely embracing that ecosystem type approach is the way to win. So yeah, I'll close there. Not sure if there's any other questions, Sean.
Yeah, so thank you, Jake, for a great presentation demo. So now we'll get into questions and answers part. Should you wish to ask a question, please be free to type in the chat box now. So just a question there, Jake, that's right. So what typically breaks when organizations try to automate RFPs? Is it data, structure, or governance?
Sorry, can you repeat that one again, please?
Yeah, so what typically breaks first when organizations try to automate RFPs? Is it data, structure, or governance?
Personally, I feel like it would be the data. I'm yet to work in an organization that has the data and knowledge part of this use case completely figured out. I'm yet to work with an organization in a client-facing role that has this figured out either. And I think we can wrap as much technology around this process. If the data's not good, the output obviously won't be a valuable one. So I think this comes back from my perspective of having many options to lean on, whether that be simple automation through to intelligent automation that just help you in the specific pockets of this type of use case.
Perfect. And next question is, how do you keep outputs auditable and traceable when AI is generating client-facing material?
Yeah, no, good question. The first one, and we're big advocates of the kind of human in the loop element of this. You notice that I tried to mention multiple times that it's important to really only shift kind of a human from being that kind of document author to document refiner. It's not that you're just removing the human. So definitely from that auditability, I think it's important that you've always got the kind of human making sure that the kind of data that's being created is valuable and accurate. In terms of general kind of maybe automated auditability, I think this is a challenge that people are kind of going through, especially in a kind of evergreen platform like Microsoft Cloud, where it's not really in our control how the models change. I think this is a governance exercise that we're all kind of getting ahead of. And I think with things like Agent 365 coming along, and there's tooling in the market now for kind of tracking and regression across models, I think this is really something that we're going to have to start to think about when we're utilizing AI as part of these processes.
Perfect. Next question is, when does it make sense to use low-code tools in Microsoft Azure and the Power Platform versus building custom solutions?
Two parts to it, I'd say. I think the one thing with custom solutions is you've got to have the skills to maintain and continue to evolve them. And I think this is always the challenge prior to low code becoming sort of as trendy as it is now. Is it's either expensive to lean on a kind of third party managed services company to do this for you, or it's expensive to hire that talent. But it does give you the flexibility, though, and the roadmap can be your own. So it's then whether you weigh up, well, actually, is it worth the investment, but we can fully control the roadmap? Or maybe with the low code angle, I think that one of the benefit is you don't need to rely on a professional developer if you're willing to invest in upskilling people on how to use that technology. I'd argue through low code, if you have the right strategy in place, you can innovate faster, because low code can obviously be used by professional developers as well. And we've seen this in some really big organizations who've really adopted things like the Power Platform, that they can innovate faster, more broadly through low code, rather than relying on a development team to eventually get around to their solution. It doesn't mean that development teams ultimately can't get to a better solution, more technically better solution. I would say that's always the case, but low code will kind of deliver the solution in most cases.
Perfect. The next question is, for my colleagues/clients, I can see a grow/learn path. One, individual use of Copilot, Copilot agents, Microsoft Foundry. What is Foundry?
What is Foundry? So Microsoft Foundry essentially is a collection of AI capabilities that sit solely in Azure. So I think one of the ways to look at it would be M365 Copilot. Like I've said a couple of times, kind of, it's a complete black box of very set generative AI capabilities that work against your content within M365. You have virtually no control over how that works. You just prompt. Then you've got Power Platform and Copilot Studio. The products work how they work, and you can build within the restrictions of the products, but you can build great solutions and have a good level of control. Then think of Microsoft Foundry as being, it's all of the capabilities with Microsoft somewhat letting you just get on with it and not having the restrictions that the products within M365 have. So they would still inherit any kind of policies that are set in Azure and things like that, but it very, very much sits in the professional development stack.
Perfect. Looks like that's all the questions. So on behalf of the ESPC community, we'd like to extend a big thank you to you again, Jake, for taking time out today to carry this webinar. Really appreciate it.
No, thank you everybody for attending. I really appreciate that.
So that's the end of today's webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/research center. Thanks again for all of you who joined us today, and hope you join us again soon. Take care.